Hey everyone watching on YouTube, and welcome to a video that was probably a little unexpected. I don't know what's gonna be on screen right now. I know in the background I've got Changing Seasons playing. I hope you like that trap, because that's the only one I'm gonna play for the whole video, because it's simpler for me. So, hopefully this is gonna be like a 20 to 30 minute video talking about Persona 3 The Answer. Because, as you may have noticed if you watched my Persona 3 playthrough, I never did The Answer. I actually, for those of you who don't know, back when I originally played Persona 3 for the first time and I was streaming it, I did a stream of The Answer. I played for like an hour or two, and after getting into the dungeon crawling bit of it and trying to go through it a little bit, I asked chat, I'm like level 25 or something? Like, how long does this go? And they were like, oh dude, you're gonna do like a ton of just non-stop fights and grinding until you end up at like level 70 or some nonsense. And I was like, you're kidding me. And at the time, I think there were some other playthroughs I wanted to start. I did not think The Answer would be that long because it was an epilogue, but chat was saying like, oh, you got like 30 hours of nonsense ahead of you. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I just really don't. So I decided that I would just watch the cutscenes for The Answer. Maybe I would do it on stream. Maybe I would do something else. I don't know. But anyways, I was like, I'm not gonna play through it because that sounds dreadfully boring. And a bunch of people in chat were like, yeah, I didn't play it either. It was a major grind. So I just like looked up the cutscenes and stuff. So I ended up not actually playing The Answer because of that. And I never got around to watching it. I just never really did because I was like, oh, I'll get to it eventually. And then I never did. Pretty much. I don't even remember when my Persona 3 playthrough was, like 2 years ago or something, so it had been a long while. But as you probably know, I've been playing Persona 4 Arena Ultimax recently, and I'm not done with Arena Ultimax yet. I think I have one more stream left. I'm nearly done with Ultimax's episode Persona 3, and then I'll get the true ending, so I'm very nearly done with it. But I decided, you know what? Before I get to the end of Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, I'm gonna go look up the cutscenes of The Answer and watch it. And what I watched with cutscenes, hopefully it all had it in it, was a little under 3 hours, so I was like, man, there was like 30 hours of gameplay for these 3 hours of cutscenes. That's madness. But, so here we are. This is my video explaining how I felt about The Answer after watching all the cutscenes and whatnot, and what I thought of it. So, if you haven't seen The Answer or whatever, I'm not going to be bringing stuff up on screen from the thing or whatever, because I'm lazy. So, go watch it yourself. You can find it on YouTube, where people have, like, super cut together all of the cutscenes and whatnot. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about that, because I didn't play it on my channel, because it sounded like a horrible grind. So, I don't know how long this video is going to be. Hopefully no more than 30 minutes, but we all know that I like to talk and I can go on for a while. But I'm hoping to get it around 20 minutes, 30 minutes max. So, maybe I'll even get it done shorter, who knows. But let's get into it. There are 3 main points I want to get at about The Answer, because I know The Answer is very divisive from what I've seen online. My boy Michael, for those of you who don't know, my boy Michael, a lot of you probably do know because you've watched my content presumably and have seen Michael in videos and we've chatted about it here and there, but Michael is a huge fan of Persona 3. I'm a big fan of Persona 3. I love Persona 3. I have some issues with it, obviously, if you watch my playthrough, so I don't love everything of it 100%, but Michael likes it more than I do, and I like it a lot, so that's saying something. But, Michael was not a fan of The Answer, and I knew that going in, so I was like, okay, well, Michael and I have disagreed on stuff before because he likes the ending of Persona 3, and I want to make it clear, I don't hate the ending of Persona 3. I don't really like it all that much. That didn't ruin the game for me or anything. I still really enjoyed Persona 3, but I was not a huge fan of the ending of Persona 3 where, spoilers for Persona 3, why are you watching this video if you don't know? At the end of Persona 3, the protagonist sacrifices himself and dies, and then the end of the game is like, again, it's been a while since I played, I should have double-checked this before doing this video, but I believe the way Persona 3 ends is after he sacrifices himself, all of the SEES members kind of go about their next days, like, not realizing, like, their memories are messed up or something. And then all of a sudden, like, they don't remember the protagonist or something like that. And then all of a sudden, at the very end, when Aigis is holding the protagonist as he dies, all of the SEES members remember, like, we made a promise to go meet at graduation or whatever. And they all get to the roof, and then boom, the game is over. I think it goes straight into credits. Like, you see all of the SEES members standing there looking at Aigis and the dead protagonist. I don't think they even really get any lines or anything. And to me, I didn't really like that because it felt really sudden, and it didn't really feel like there was closure for the SEES members to like have that final moment where they're like, oh, the protagonist died for us and all. You just get that moment with, I think, Aigis at the end saying like he's gone or whatever. But if I remember right, Aigis was like, she was crying but also smiling or something, so it was supposed to be an uplifting like he did it for us or whatever. Again, it's been a while since I played the original Persona 3, but I believe that's roughly how the journey ended, give or take. I might have a thing here and there mixed up, but I think that's the rough ending of how it went. So, I was not a huge fan of that. I still really enjoyed Persona 3 overall. It was a very fun game. But I didn't like that a whole lot, which is why I was very interested to see what The Answer does as an epilogue, to see if it would change my opinion at all. I really should have done this back when I originally played the game, but I didn't for some reason. So, we're here now. Better late than never, right? But the main three things I want to talk about is, first of all, the gameplay of The Answer, which I kind of already touched upon. The character moments and the building of the characters in The Answer, because there are really only two main things I care about in The Answer. How they handled the characters, and then how they handled the plot, like the storyline, and how it adds on to the original Persona 3 ending of the journey. So, the gameplay and whatnot, super lame, as I already said. I didn't play it. I know a lot of other people did not play it. Michael, as I just said, Michael is a huge fan of Persona 3. It's one of his favorite games. He does like Persona 5 a little bit more, but he says Persona 3, last I talked to him, is close behind in him for Persona 5, and also that it's one of his favorite games, to my knowledge. So, but even my boy Michael, he's like, nah, I didn't sit through the grind. It was way too boring, and he just looked up the stuff. I don't know what the developers were thinking. Maybe they thought that, man, to justify people buying Persona 3 FES if they already played the original Persona 3, we have to give them a lot of content. So they were like, okay, well, let's put in 30 hours of dungeon crawling. But as someone who played FES off the cuff, having Persona 3 and going through that entire, like, 80-hour game, give or take however many hours, depending on how you play, playing through all that, going from level 1 all the way up to whatever level you finished Persona 3 at, I think it was like level 70 to 80, somewhere in there, I don't remember exactly. Doing all of that, and then after you're done with it, going to The Answer to see the epilogue, and then being like, alright, you're back at level 25, you've got like mid-level skills, enjoy grinding back up to level 70 and going through like endless RNG randomized dungeons, and obviously the dungeon crawling is how the game plays, that was the technology they had at the time, but in normal Persona 3, you have some really good breakup of the social aspects of the game and plenty of cutscenes and interacting with social links and all that to break up the dungeon crawling a good deal instead of doing 90% dungeon crawling for like 40 hours with minimal cutscenes spread throughout. Because like I told you, I watched all of the cutscenes online and those cutscenes added up to a little under 3 hours. So, in roughly 30 hours of dungeon crawling, you have it very rarely broken up, and a lot of those cutscenes were backloaded. They didn't show up until the back half. There were very few cutscenes in, from what I saw, very few cutscenes in the first half of The Answer, and then they loaded you with like an hour of cutscenes at the end to wrap it up. So, and they had like 30 minutes of cutscenes at the start. So there was very little breakup of the dungeon crawling mechanic in the middle, which I personally find really dumb, because like, yeah, Persona 3 was a dungeon crawler, but it had all this other stuff to break up that monotony and, like, really help with that. But The Answer doesn't have any of that. It's just straight up like, yeah, dude, it's just climbing Tartarus, basically, for, like, 5 hours at a time, and then you get, like, maybe a 5 to 10 minute cutscene, and then you get to do another 5 hours of dungeon crawling. And for me, personally, that's miserable. I hate it. So, I really think they dropped the ball on it. They should have made The Answer shorter as a whole. It should have been like a 10-hour experience, and when they threw you into it, you should have been at like level 70 or whatever when you finished the main game. And then, like, you finished the game at like level 80, or something like that. Like, they really could have cut down on the dungeon crawling aspect, and then I would have played through it. If it was like a 10 to 15 hour epilogue, because I think Persona 5 The Royal, when it added on its end bit, and the same for Persona 4 Golden to my knowledge, because I've never played the original Persona 4, probably added on like 10 hours of content, roughly, give or take, with like a dungeon and then the storyline and other stuff alongside it, and you could do more social link stuff and whatnot in Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5 Royal when it added in that extra bit. And I think that they learned from that, because when they did Golden and Royal, that's how they did it, instead of doing it like they did The Answer. I think The Answer, the way that they presented it, gameplay-wise, was a mistake. And as a result, many people, myself included, skipped it, and didn't want to have to play through all the grinding. So, that's pretty much all I have to say on the gameplay and all. I think it was a mistake. I think they did it very poorly, but, I think it was a product of the time. Persona 3 was the first Persona in that style with the calendar system and all that, because I haven't played Persona 1 and 2, but that's what I've always been told, and I believe that's how it goes. So, you know, they were learning a lot of stuff, because I think the way they did social links in Persona 3 is pretty whack, too, when compared to 4 and 5. Like, the whole, if you max out a female confidant, you have to date her, the reverse social link thing is really annoying, etc., etc. So, I feel like they did, you know, after they made these mistakes, what I would consider mistakes, in Persona 3 and Persona 3 The Answer, when they did Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5 Royal, they did it a lot better. So, I'm glad that Atlus learned and did a much better take of it. But, that's why I didn't play the game, and that's my only complaint about the gameplay and stuff, so now that we've got that behind us, I'm not gonna be talking about, like, the gameplay or any of that. There's one thing I'll bring up about the gameplay, but it's related to the characters. But now we're gonna talk about what I really care about, which is the characters and the plot line of the game. I should've got myself a glass of water for this. I was like, it's a 20-minute video, dude, you don't need a glass of water. I was very wrong. But, we're already at 10 minutes. This video is gonna end up being more than 20, but that's fine. That's fine. I'll talk about the characters and how the characters were used and, like, the building of the characters and all that, because that's where most of my negativity for The Answer comes from. Like I said, I know that, The Answer is not looked upon very favorably by the Persona community. I think it's kind of split. I don't know how much it's split, if it's, like, half and half, if it's, like, 80% of people think it's trash, 20% of people like it, etc., etc. I don't really get into the community that much of Persona because, you know, communities are toxic 9 times out of 10. But, I know there are plenty of people who are not a fan of it. My boy Michael included. Shout out to you, Michael, if you're actually watching this, because I already messaged him a lot of my thoughts. So, I don't know if he'll bother watching this or not, but, so yeah, the characters. My main complaint with the characters is how they used Mitsuru and Yukari, and I know that Yukari is very divisive in The Answer. I have also seen mostly comments on the video, the YouTube video I watched of all the cutscenes. I saw comments about it where it was divisive of people defending Yukari and people being against how Yukari acted. But, quick run through, before I get to that, let's go in order of how The Answer was played out. So you start with the characters in the dorm, having their final day, turning in their evokers like it's closing. Everyone's a little sad and melancholy because, like, Akihiko and Yukari aren't there at the start. I believe they couldn't make it or Yukari didn't want to be there. And they're like, oh, this is the end and all, we're turning in our evokers, the dark hour's done, the dorm's being closed, Mitsuru and Akihiko are graduating, they're out, Aigis isn't going back to school, etc., etc. And, it's all pretty sad, but, I think they did a really good showing at the start there of showing how everyone is kind of upset and like, man, this sucks. You know, the protagonist isn't with us anymore. I'm gonna probably keep calling him protagonist, but I might call him Minato here and there, because that's what I named him in my playthrough. But yeah, so I think they did a really good show of, like, what you would expect to see the characters acting like after the conclusion of the journey, the main story of Persona 3, with the loss of the protagonist and whatnot. And then it leads into the whole deal with Metis appearing out of nowhere and causing trouble. And, how that leads into the time skip of how, like, suddenly they're all stuck on March 31st, I believe it is, and March 31st just keeps replaying over and over and over, and they can't get out of it because they're stuck in this time loop, and Metis shows up out of nowhere, very surprising. Who is that? How the heck is she here? And she, she acts as kind of like the guide of this explanation of, like, here's how everything's going on. I did really like how hard stop Akihiko was about not trusting Metis, and how Mitsuru kind of backed him up, like, yeah, I can't really, and then also Junpei and Yukari jumped in a little bit of just like, yeah, Yukari showed up, tried to kill us all, started blaming us for this going on, and now she expects us to just work with her and trust her and whatnot. So, you know, I liked that moment of C's kind of like being a bit united and being like, don't trust this Metis chick. Out of nowhere, some other robot like, Aigis that shouldn't even exist, because Aigis should be the only one that was made of her generation. Obviously, we know there are other generations because of Labris and Persona 4 and whatnot. But, like, as far as, like, a 7th generation goes, shouldn't have been any of them other than Aigis, etc., etc. So that was really neat. And then it goes into the many hours of dungeon crawling, and at the end of each little dungeon crawling section, you get what I actually really love. One of my favorite things about The Answer is you get to see these throwbacks to how the characters all got their personas. When I played Persona 3, I played the games backwards, as you may know if you've been watching my channel. My first one was Persona 5, then I played 4 Golden, and then I played 3 FES after that. And then I think Royal came out after I played 3 FES, and then I played Royal. But, In Persona 3, the characters just have their personas. You get a moment with them unlocking their Tier 2 personas later on, because that's story-related instead of social link-related, like they are in future games. But you get to see all of the Persona 5, you get to see all the Persona 3 cast, like the moment where they unlock their personas, basically. Which I thought was really cool, because in 4 and 5, you get to see basically every character awaken. I'm trying to think. I don't think you ever get to see how Akechi awoke into his personas in Persona 5, but you get to see all the other Phantom Thieves. And in Persona 4, you get to see all of the investigation team get theirs, I think, other than maybe Teddy, but Teddy still has that moment where he faces his shadow and whatnot. No, Teddy didn't have his persona until he faced his shadow, did he? I don't remember. It's been a minute since I played Persona 4 Golden, but you get to see that moment with the shadow, at least, which I believe is him getting his persona, or, like, getting his persona upgraded or something. I don't recall. It's been a hot minute, and I don't remember a lot about Teddy, because I don't like Teddy. But, you get to see through those games, basically, the majority, if not all of the characters that matter, at least. Like, you don't see Adachi get his persona awoken, I don't think. Again, I don't recall in Persona 4. But in Persona 3, you don't get to see any of that other than the protagonist awakening. You get to see him awaken to Orpheus, and Orpheus transform into Thanatos and all that, which is big foreshadowing for him having death inside of him and whatnot. But you don't really see the exact, like, oh, here's the persona, like, showing up and awakening. You kind of do with Mitsuru's thing in The Answer. You kind of see her awakening her persona, more or less. I don't remember if it fully shows it or it's just like a brief glimpse, but it's there when she's a little kid, which was really nice. But seeing the characters realize after a bit, like, okay, what do all of these moments from the past that we're encountering have in common? We're seeing when all of the C's members, like, kind of awoken to their personas. I think you see Koromaru awaken to his in Persona 3? I can't remember, because he doesn't really have a past moment with his, where you see, like, this is where he got his moment of controlling his persona. But you get to see the moment that led to Yukari, Mitsuru, Akihiko, Junpei. Like, those were the moments where, like, this is where we awoken our personas. And same for Ken as well. He was the first one. I forgot him for a second. But you see Ken when he's sitting in that police station. That's kind of when they all get their resolve, and that's like, okay, that's the moment that, like, I snapped there. It's like the trigger for, hey, this is where they got their personas, which I think was really neat, and that was something that was kind of missing in Persona 3, in my opinion, because they gave you so many characters out the gate, and they're like, yeah, like Akihiko, Mitsuru, all of them, they've already got their personas. You get to see Fuka's persona, like, when she gets it in 3, because she was a unique case in how that went. But, yeah, overall, just, I really enjoyed getting those little tidbits of seeing the characters of when they unlock their personas, and getting to see younger versions of the characters. Junpei and Yukari weren't really, and Ken weren't really younger versions, but Mitsuru and Akihiko, you got to see back when they were a bit younger, when they were first getting into C's and doing all their nonsense. That was really nice. I really enjoyed those moments. Also, definitely shout out, one of my favorite moments in The Answer is when Junpei is leaving his house because his dad is an alcoholic and is not a good father and all. And he's all, you know, downtrodden about it, and he left and whatnot. And then Koromaru, my boy Koromaru. That's such a nice little touch to have Koromaru show up and, like, sit there and be with Junpei and, like, comfort him in that moment, sort of. And Junpei didn't even realize at the time, but then later on he sees it back there. Like, that was Koromaru who was there for me when I needed him. I really, really loved that. That was very great. Very nice. Actually, The Answer made me look upon Junpei a lot more favorably. I feel like I look a lot more favorably upon Yukari, Ken, and Junpei as a whole as characters after playing Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, because I enjoyed seeing them a lot more in that game and how they were acting after Persona 3 as opposed to how I didn't like them very much during the story of Persona 3. But, so that might have had some influence, but I really enjoyed that moment. So you get through all that, and then you get to the part that everyone has issues with, myself included, which is, after they finish going through all the doors, and then they have to go to the Coliseum to fight because they have all these keys to the truth. And Metis tells them, like, okay, you can use these keys to destroy the Abyss of Time and go back and stop the time loop, or you can go back in time to when the protagonist sacrificed himself, and you can try and change things. You can try and make it where he doesn't die or stop Nyx or some nonsense. And I really like this premise. I like the setup of it, where, like, C's has this moment where they have to decide, like, we just spent a year with the protagonist, like, our closest friend. Like, you know, it's the protagonist. Like, he's the one that has the social links with everyone. Like, their closest friend, basically, that they all love dearly. And they're being told, like, you have a chance to go back and see if you can do something different. There's no guarantee. You don't know what'll happen, but you can give it an attempt. You can go for it. And, like, I really like that bit of, like, how they have those moments and they're like, this is gonna split the team, because obviously Akihiko is immediately like, how on earth are we gonna win that fight again? Like, we were lucky to win the first time. What are we gonna do this time that'll let us win? And also, what, like, how could we do anything different? Like, it's such a big risk, and we risk losing instead if something goes wrong, and then the world, like, ends. Everyone dies, the end. It won't just be the protagonist dead, it'll be all of us dead, along with the world. Like, how could we risk something like that? Which is a very reasonable take to stand at. But then Yukari, and this is where my problem comes in. I have no issue with Yukari being like, I want to go back and save him. Like, I want to get him back. I want to try and bring him back and make everything work out nicely where we're all here instead of him being dead. I understand that greatly, and I think it's very in character and very fitting. The way they went about it, I think, was hot trash. Because, and I should have double-checked this again, but I believe Yukari is immediately like, no, we need to go back, and Akihiko is like, no, we shouldn't. And I believe Junpei is the one who speaks up and says, like, I'm gonna be honest, guys, I hate to say it, but I'm a little afraid. Like, I'm afraid to do that fight again. That we were fighting for our lives, stopping the world from just being destroyed. Like, that's really scary. I'm not sure if I can do that fight again with that pressure and that worry now that we're past it. Which, again, very reasonable from Junpei. I was shocked at how much I was on Junpei's side during the answer. I was like, man, the Atlus designers woke up on the Junpei side of the bed and decided he would be the best character in the answer. And then Yukari, what I believe is very just out of character, honestly. Yukari is just like, well, I can just take the keys from you. And she's like, well, I'll fight you for them. I'll fight every last one of you and take them. She jumps to that immediately, instead of trying to go into further discussion or trying to explain or whatnot. And I honestly hate it, because it's very, I don't want to say childish, it's very, it just feels very wrong of her to have spent, like, I understand she's closest to Minato. All of the characters should be closest to Minato, aka the protagonist. But, someone's trying to call me and I'm busy. I gotta tell them I'm busy. Sorry about that. But, with Minato, with the protagonist, like, I can understand being very close to him and, like, feeling like I will do anything to try and get him back. But she also spent a year with C's. Like, she spent a year with all of the characters and grew closer to them. She grew closest to the protagonist, I'm sure all of them did, because that's how the game is structured. But, like, all of these people should be her closest comrades and friends. And for Yukari to immediately jump to when other people are, like, they weren't even saying, like, absolutely, Akihiko might have been saying, like, absolutely not, we shouldn't. But, like, Junpei was like, oh, I'm just not sure and stuff. And some of the other characters, I think, haven't even spoken up. I think Ken had said, like, I kind of agree with Akihiko, but, like, Mitsuru hadn't really spoken up. Aigis hadn't really spoken up about their thoughts, neither had Fuka, to what I recall. But, Yukari's just immediately like, I'll just fight you. I'll just fight you all and beat you up and take it. And I'm like, really? You're not gonna try and sit down and talk with everyone? You're not gonna try and explain your reasoning for why you want to, like, why you're so adamant that, like, I want to try and go back and save him? You're just gonna immediately, not immediately, but, like, almost immediately jump to, like, hey, I'm just gonna fight you. I'm gonna beat you up. We fought together side by side for a year. You're my closest friends and allies. I'm gonna try and kill you to take it. Maybe not kill, but I'm gonna try and beat you to submission to take it. I'm just like, man, Yukari is being absolutely ridiculous here. Absolutely ridiculous. But, and I understand from the gameplay perspective what they wanted to do is they wanted to get the moment where you control Aigis and Metis, and you fight against all of the C's members in groups of 2, 1 by 1, so they had to split them up into teams. I want to make it clear, I don't have any issue with Yukari being on the side of, I want to try and go back in time and save him. I have no issue with it whatsoever. I have an issue about how they went about getting her to that point. Instead of immediately jumping at wanting to fight everyone and everything else, what they should have done, in my humble opinion, is they should have had Yukari go on the side of trying to convince the others, hey, I think we can do it. Like, if we all come together, what if we can make another miracle? What if we can save him? Or even something along the angle of, like, if he was alive now, if it was one of us who died, like you, Akihiko-senpai, Akihiko, if you were the one who sacrificed yourself, and it was the protagonist standing here, do you not think the protagonist would try and do everything in his power to save you too? Like, that's the angle that they should have had Yukari take, in my opinion. They should have had Yukari go down that road and try and do it that way. And then they could have had, as if you've seen The Answer, obviously, you know Mitsuru sides with Yukari because they all end up in groups of 2. It's Aigis and Metis, and then it's, and Fuka ends up on Aigis' side because she doesn't fight. And then it's Akihiko and Ken on one team, Junpei and Koromaru on one team, and then Mitsuru and Yukari are a team together. So, they could have still split up the teams just fine by having Yukari go that route, and it would have felt a lot more in character for me. Personally, and I would have, it would have made me less annoyed with Yukari if Yukari was just like, I think we can make a difference. I think we can figure something out. If we all get back there together, all of us together again with the protagonist with us, and we talk to him and, try and work out with the knowledge we have now of what happened, I think we can try to make a miracle, try to make a difference, try to do something that will change it. But she didn't go that route. Instead, she kept very to herself, just, called the other characters cowards and stuff like that. I believe she just, shouted out at, Akihiko and, Junpei at some point. It's like, you guys are cowards. I can't believe this, that you would betray him or something like that. And I was like, Yukari, can you sit down? You're being ridiculous. Come on, you all fought. They have reasonable worries that things could go wrong and that the world could end. This is a big deal, you know? But, I just really, really hate the way they went about it. And another thing that I dislike is how they went about it with Mitsuru as well. Because they have Mitsuru basically just not really give her reasons much at all and just agree with Yukari. And you see after the fights are done that Mitsuru explains why she did, and I'll get to that in a moment. But they don't have Mitsuru really give her 2 cents. Really. She doesn't have a reason, one way or the other. She doesn't explain herself. She says, at some point, I believe, I agree with a lot of what Yukari is saying. And then she's like, so I'm gonna side with her. And then after the fights are over, when everyone's lost, Mitsuru says, Yukari was there for me when my dad died, and she was, a pillar of strength for me, basically, and I promised to myself that if Yukari was ever in that scenario, I would be there for her, and that's why she did it. And I don't think that's a bad reason, necessarily, coming from Mitsuru. I think the fact that she just kept that completely quiet and just sided with Yukari almost silently leading up to the fights was very jarring and stupid, instead of Mitsuru giving any of her own reasons for why she wanted to go back and try and save the protagonist, or even why she was on Yukari's side from the get-go. But mostly my main problem is that I don't have a problem with Yukari being against the others and wanting to take it to the point of, well, we have to fight then, that's our only option, because Akihiko obviously was also on board with, we're just gonna have to fight, there's no other choice. But, the way they got there, I think, was with Yukari was very poorly done. And Akihiko, as well, was a little abrasive with it. I think he was very much too, alright, let's fight, let's do it. He was way too quick to accept, let's get it, let's punch, instead of try and work it out anymore. Junpei, surprisingly, I think it's Koromaru rubbing off on him. Junpei was, the best character in The Answer. He was like, listen, I don't want to decide one way or another right now. I want us all to sit down like calm, reasonable adults who have become close friends over the past year and try to talk it out instead of get to just fighting with it. I think Junpei was on the most right side of the whole thing along with Koromaru. So, but yeah, my main complaint with that is I don't like how that happened. I don't like how they had Yukari go about getting to the fighting portion and how Mitsuru sided with her. After the fights are over, Yukari basically breaks down saying, I just want to see him again, I just want to be able to try and save him, etc., etc. I think that's very in character, that she would be so broken up over it. I just think that the whole, immediately turning against C's and wanting to fight them at the start was poorly done. I really think it would have been a lot better if she had gone the route of, oh, I want to, we can do this, or maybe we can save it, don't we owe it to him to take that chance? And I think honestly, my only real big complaint story-wise out of The Answer would have been handled right there if Yukari had just acted better, but still gotten to that fighting point. I also just really, after Yukari loses and everyone comes back, she asks Aigis, you still don't know what you're gonna do, are you? And then she immediately runs up and tries to yank the key from Aigis. I'm just like, dude, come on. And I saw some people in the comments section of that YouTube video saying, you don't understand, she's been through such grief and all and whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, I understand being, in grief and wanting to save him, but, turning on Aigis and your friends like that is, unacceptable in my eyes regardless. Also, Yukari has already dealt with heavy loss in her life, with the loss of her father, and she's moved it, I don't remember her story super well in Persona 3, because it's been a minute, and I wasn't a huge fan of Yukari, so I don't remember it that well, but Yukari has already gone through the grief of losing her dad, and, overcoming that with her friends and stuff like that, and, having people with her, the protagonist being one of them, yes, but, she had, gotten past that point, so to lose someone else and then for her to devolve to this, to me, feels like a major regression of her character, instead of her showing that, she should be able to handle it a lot better because of having dealt with that, whatchamacallit, dealt with that and whatnot. But, they get through all that, and then Aigis decides she wants to go back and see the moment, not decide if she goes back to that moment or not. So, yeah. Aigis, I really liked Aigis in The Answer. This is the last character I think I need to talk about, but I really enjoyed Aigis as a character in The Answer, like her dealing with grief for the first time, and when you get towards that end, and you get to see some of Aigis's history of how she got her ability to become a wild card suddenly from the protagonist, and how she was, like, wishing she could go back to being a machine. Like, she's like, I gained these emotions, I got close with the protagonist and the others, but now he's dead, and that hurts. It's like the first time Aigis really experiences grief, and she's like, oh, I can't take it, I'd rather go back to being a machine when I didn't have these issues, which goes back to, like, the apathy syndrome that was a main thing in the journey. Like, they were all, like, what was going wrong with everyone, and why Nyx was showing up for the fall was because people were falling into apathy syndrome and, like, just wanting to die and, like, giving up on life and stuff and whatnot. And then Aigis goes through that after the protagonist dies and all, which I think was very poetic, I guess, and really built on Aigis as a character. Really made me appreciate Aigis a lot more compared to when I originally played. And again, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax has endeared me a bit more to the Persona 3 cast in general, because I really like what they did with them in that game, Aigis included. But, yeah, man, this video is already over 30 minutes. We're going for like a 40-minute video. I'm getting close to done, I promise. I'm not going to go over the plot for very long. But, the whole thing with, I'm a little confused on how, like, Metis became, like, a shadow of Aigis. Like, all of Aigis's, like, trying to get rid of her, with Aigis trying to get rid of her, human emotions and whatnot. I don't really know how that came to pass, necessarily, but I do think it's neat and very on brand for Persona, to be honest. Very similar to how Pharos played a role for the protagonist in the main game, I feel like. So, that was pretty neat. But yeah, and then at the end, definitely my favorite thing is at the very end, after everything is said and done, and Aigis decides, like, we're not going to go back, we're going to go to the future, like, we're going to continue going on in his memory and all. When Aigis gets there and she's like, hey, I've changed my mind. Like, I was trying to get rid of my emotions and all by going back to the lab and not going to my last year of school. And she's like, Mitsuru, can you somehow make it happen? Can I go to school with Junpei and Yukari and finish out, and Fuka, and finish out the year and, like, live with my friends and continue being human, basically, which is what she worked towards throughout Persona 3 in the first place. And that last moment, especially, where they're leaving the dorm, and Yukari is like, you know, Aigis, maybe we can get a room together or whatever, maybe we can board together and stuff like that, and Aigis is just like, she's smiling, and she's like, yeah, maybe we can. I think that was a really beautiful send-off. I think that was a very well-done bit at the end for Aigis as a character in general. I very much enjoyed that. So, that's pretty much all I have to say about the characters. Overall, I liked the way they did the characters, and, like, the progression and the building of the characters and seeing their pasts, except for the way they handled Yukari, Mitsuru, and a little bit of how they handled Akihiko when they got to the Colosseum fighting section. That, I was not okay with how they did that. I think they could have done it a lot better, personally. But, yeah. So then we have the overall plot, which is the last thing I'm going to talk about. I'm going to try and get through this pretty quick, because I don't want to go more than 40 minutes in this video. But, the Abyss of Time as a concept is really neat. I like the description they give for it of, like, hey, Tartarus, like, left this hole behind when it rose up out of the ground and all, and that's what the Abyss of Time is. Super neat thing. The Shadow protagonist that shows up in the thing, because, he's, like, the combined regrets of all of the C's members from not being able to keep the protagonist alive at the end and feeling like they failed in that respect, and then having to fight an evil version of the protagonist, I think was very on brand for Persona, a very neat little thing. I would have loved to have gotten to do that fight myself if, you know, the rest of the answer wasn't such a grind to get to it. But I thought that was all very on brand and very neat. I like the way they went about that. The main thing, really, that I want to talk about the answer is the only thing that, like, when I talked about the character stuff, that basically covered the majority of the answer. The only thing really left to talk about when it comes to the plot and the story, I feel like, is the very ending when they go back to see the protagonist as he beat Nyx. When Aigis is like, I don't want to make a decision to go back or not until I see what happened to him in that moment. And they go back and look in the past and see that moment where he becomes the seal, where he becomes the door, as, like, I finally understand the door meme in Persona 3, where it's like, dude turned himself into a door, saddest thing I've ever seen, you know? But they go back and see that moment, and then Metis is like, Nyx is not a malevolent being. or whatnot. Nyx just kind of exists. What the malevolent being that's trying to get Nyx to end the world is this other creature, Erebus. And Erebus is created from the subconscious of all the people in the world who want the world to end, who want the fall to show up. Like, what's his name? The pun dude, Akutsuki, because he was trying to get the fall to happen. But, like, there's this demonic creature, Erebus, who was created from the unconscious collection of people who have, like, given up on life and want everything to end, trying to reach out to Nyx and pull Nyx down to start the fall and destroy everything, and the protagonist's life force is what is blocking Erebus from reaching Nyx through the power of the wild card, presumably. Because Erebus then turns on Aegis, because Aegis has the power of the wild card, and that's when they fight Erebus and whatnot at the end of The Answer. I love Erebus as a concept. I didn't realize this until I played Shin Megami Tensei 5, which recently came out just, what was that, like 6 or 7 months ago? When did that game come out? The end of 2021? I don't remember exactly. I think it was like October or November of 2021, but it might have been earlier than that. I don't recall. But, I didn't realize it until I played Shin Megami Tensei 5, but after playing SMT 5, Persona 3, the journey, the ending of it, feels a lot like SMT to me. It feels like Persona 3 was still very heavily like, this is a Shin Megami Tensei spin-off. And I want to make it clear, the Persona games are spin-offs of SMT. Obviously, they are. But from Persona 3 onward, Persona has definitely gotten more of its own identity. People recognize Persona as, like, its own thing. A lot of people just know Persona and don't even know about SMT. So, like, Persona has, like, really gotten its own identity as its own franchise from Persona 3 onward. But I feel like the ending of the journey in Persona 3 was still very rooted in SMT-style storytelling and gameplay. Well, not gameplay necessarily, but storytelling, definitely. So, to me, the journey, with how sudden it was and with the protagonist dying at the end and all, was very SMT to me. And I'm not a huge SMT fan. I played SMT 5, and it wasn't a bad game, but, like, the story left a lot to be desired. I didn't care about any of the characters. The gameplay was pretty fun. But, not a huge SMT fan, way more of a Persona fan. The ending of Persona 3, as I look back on it, felt very SMT to me. The ending of The Answer, where it has more of the Persona theme of the collective unconscious, because, I mean, like, that's what Persona 4 and 5 are all about, is, Amino Sagiri and Iza, I believe Izanami as well, but I should have double-checked this, are made from, like, the collective unconscious. They're trying to grant humanity's wishes and all that in Persona 4, and Yaldabaoth is doing the same thing in Persona 5, and Maruki is doing the same thing in Persona 5 The Royal to a lesser extent. Even the spin-off games in Persona 4 Arena, the Ultimate Bad and Persona 4 Arena Ultimax is the unconsciousness of, like, people who want to be alone or something like that. I don't remember the exact specifics of it. And then in Persona 5 Strikers, it's again a case of, like, the unconscious collective gathering together to make this evil deity figure, basically. That's very on brand for Persona. That's what Persona does. And Erebus fits that far more than Nyx does as a final villain. Nyx feels very much like an SMT antagonist. Erebus is a lot more of a Persona antagonist, in my opinion, and I really love what Erebus represents and how Erebus functions, because they're, you know, people can get that in life when they're in really rough times or depressive episodes and whatnot, where it's like it's hard to want to continue on and to imagine, like, what would it be like if it was just, like, what's the point, and all that. And so that's how Erebus is formed and is trying to call down Nyx to just end it all. So I think that is very incredibly fitting with the how Persona is as a franchise. Very well done. I also, obviously, it's no secret, I don't really like sad endings in stories. If you want to sprinkle tragedy and sadness throughout a storyline, go for it. If it's done well, I'm for it. But when a game ends, I want at least a bittersweet ending, if not just a happy ending at the end. When I get to the end of an 80-hour game, I want to feel good. You know what I mean? I want to be like, okay, good. They got what they wanted in the end. Like, the characters got a good ending. Like, they got a happiness at the end, to some extent. That's what I want out of games, and Persona 3 didn't really have that for me. Persona 3 The Answer, still not my ideal. Not as much of an ending that I enjoy as much as, like, Persona 4 Golden's ending, or Persona 5 regular or Royal's ending, where they have the moment of, like, the main character going home and all of the friends moving on and continuing their lives. Persona 3 was very sudden. The protagonist dies at the end. I'm not a fan of that. Persona 3 The Answer, gives a lot of closure to the SEES members, I feel like, with getting to say their farewells. They say it at the end after they beat Erebus, and they see, like, oh, the protagonist is, like, he gave his life to keep everyone else safe and everyone alive, ourselves included. I think they do very well at showing them kind of moving on and getting to move on with their lives, Aigis especially. And they give this bit of a hopeful bit to the end that's kind of open-ended, where it's like, Aigis is like, I hope one day humanity can like, move, like, come together in some way so that Erebus stops existing, and if Erebus stops existing, then the protagonist no longer has to be giving up his life for stuff. So there's like that little crumb of hope that, like, maybe somehow, some way, one day the protagonist can be free from his bonds. He's not just straight up dead. Like, he gave his life to hold that back, and he could come back in some fashion. And as I like finish more video games and finish watching anime and reading manga and stuff, I find myself really appreciating open-ended endings to things, because it's really hard to end a story in a satisfying manner. I have had many moments in video games and anime where the ending has not been to my tastes, and I'm like, I don't really like how they did that at the very end. That kind of soured the experience a little bit. One of my favorite animes, which was never fully animated, so I read the manga, one of my favorite anime/manga is Magi. Magi has a great ending where it's very open-ended, so they finish up all of the conflict that they set up throughout the story, they finish all the character arcs, get everything done and whatnot, but then at the very end, they have, like, a conclusion to the story you've been reading, but they leave open, like, these possibilities of, like, and then they went on to do who knows what. And they kind of leave it up to the viewer to sort of interpret, like, so you can just imagine whatever you want basically happened at that point. And I appreciate endings like that a lot nowadays, where they leave it open to the viewer a little bit. So if you're the kind of person who really wants a sad ending where you're just like, oh, everything sucked at the end, you can kind of imagine that. You can be like, Erebus was never defeated in the future, like the protagonist basically stayed there in purgatory forever, etc., whatever. Or, if you're like me and you want more of a happy ending, you can kind of live with that. Like, you can imagine there was like a hope that, hey, maybe one day Aigis is immortal, presumably, because she's a robot. Maybe one day Aigis did get to see a time where humans got over, like, wanting the world to end. Like, the humans who were creating Erebus got past it, and then Erebus stopped manifesting, and as a result, the protagonist got to move on, got to either come back to life or move on to the afterlife even, I don't know, however that works. But, got to see Aigis again, or the other SEES members, who knows. But, and I appreciate that greatly. But Erebus as a concept and the lore of Nyx and Erebus as entities, as characters, whatever, I really, really appreciated and I really liked. And overall, made me look more favorably on Persona 3's ending in general, because while it's still not the ending that I would have loved, personally, I like the ending that you get by completing the answer a lot more than I like the ending of Persona 3. It felt a lot more fleshed out for giving the SEES members that closure after losing the protagonist, instead of it just being a very sudden, like, end to the protagonist and an end to the game, in my opinion, of how the journey was. It felt like it gave a lot more closure to SEES, gave a lot more development for Aigis, for her having to get through that whole, like, losing someone close to her for the first time and wanting to give up on her emotions, basically going through. She was, like, one of the people, basically, that would make Erebus exist, because she, like, felt that way and whatnot, and had that apathy syndrome, basically, for, not apathy syndrome specifically, but, like, the concept of it, you know, that depression, basically. I thought it did wonders for Aigis, mishandled Yukari, Mitsuru, and even Akihiko a little bit, but overall, the closure that they all get at the end, I think was very, very beautifully well done. It gave a much better ending to the protagonist that was more specific, I feel like, and overall, I just enjoyed the ending of The Answer a good deal. I like the way they wrapped it up, so there we go. Gonna end up being like a 45-minute video, but I think I got out everything that I wanted to get out. I'm looking through my notes right here to make sure that there wasn't anything I jotted down in this notepad that I wanted to bring up that I didn't, but I think I covered everything. There was one other gameplay thing I was going to say, is I think one of the reasons they had Mitsuru join Yukari so easily is because they needed all of the groups broken into two, so they just kind of threw Mitsuru in with Yukari. I think that was mostly a gameplay perspective is why they did that, because they were really focused on making sure that Aigis got to fight 3 teams of 2. But again, I think they could have gotten Mitsuru and Yukari together on the side of let's go revive him in a much more elegant and better written way than what they did. But, yeah, I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover and talked about everything. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Changing Seasons for 45 minutes, because I sure have. And that's not sarcasm, I love this OST. This is honestly one of my favorite OSTs from Persona 3, maybe even my favorite. I mean, Burn My Dread is amazing, but this is definitely up there. Top 5, undoubtedly, probably top 3, if not number 1. But, yeah. I think that's it. I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. I think I said everything about it. I'm sorry that this video came out so much later after my Persona 3 playthrough was completed, but I hope you enjoyed getting to hear my thoughts on the answer. Overall, at the end of the day, I give it my stamp of approval. I think that Persona 3 is better for having the answer than it would be without the answer, personally. I prefer Persona 3 as a whole with the answer than without. Really wish they hadn't, like, butchered Yukari and Mitsuru the way they did, but what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, you know? Overall, very much enjoyed what they did with the answer, and I wish that it wasn't such an awful grind, so I could have just played it and experienced myself, instead of chat telling me, like, hey, it's 40 hours of dungeon crawling, you're gonna be miserable. But, yeah, I think I'm done. I think that's all I have to say. Feel free to leave your thoughts and comments and whatnot. Ask me any questions, and maybe I'll respond to them, maybe I won't, who knows? But yeah, overall, the answer, seal of approval. Persona 3, great game. Fantastic game. Really love it. Persona is great as a franchise. I'll play Persona 3 Portable one day, I promise. But that'll cover it. That'll cover it. Awesome. Thanks for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. If you want to catch streams live, I'll try and remember to put my Twitch channel in the description. If you want to catch me playing games live, Persona or otherwise, please drop by. Or keep watching my content on YouTube. I appreciate the support either way. Hope to see you in the future for more playthroughs or one-off videos like this, maybe even. But more playthroughs, Atlus or otherwise. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you later. Till then, farewell.